Hi, my name's Kelly Siderio, and this presentation is on counseling individuals of Asian descent. Here's some basic information. Asian Americans are currently 4.8% of the population in the US. They're one of the fastest growing ethnic communities, and they have immigrated to the United States for a large variety of reasons, some of which includes seeking employment or a better life, and then some people have come as refugees. Asian Americans faced a wide variety of historical discrimination. Some examples are housing restrictions, educational limitations, ethnic-specific business taxes, and anti-immigration laws. Asian Americans also experience current discrimination. Some examples of this would be English-only language initiatives, income to education disparities, where Asian Americans who have the same or higher educational level make less money than a white person in the same occupation, and then glass ceiling effects. There are also many Asian stereotypes that exist in the United States. There are many xenophobic portrayals of Asian Americans in popular media. There's also the model minority myth, which suggests that Asian Americans have overcome their minority status through their successes. It suggests that Asian Americans are all high achieving and highly educated, and this myth serves to obscure legitimate racial disparities that Asian Americans face. Also, Asian Americans are sometimes considered illegitimate Americans. One thing that's important as a counselor to be aware of is Asian American heterogeneity. There are 43 distinct Asian ethnic subgroups. Asian Americans have ancestry or have emigrated from 20 different countries, and there are also within group differences. So some ways that Asian Americans might vary is their language proficiency, their immigration history, their education level, and so on. This is important for counselors to know so that they don't fall into the trap of thinking that Asian Americans share many of the same characteristics. Some things to consider when counseling Asian Americans include your client's immigration or refugee history and how that might affect their understanding of and adaptation to U.S. culture and norms. You would also want to consider the variety of economic and educational levels of your Asian American clients and not assume that they are all members of highly achieving or highly educated families. Further, you'd want to consider linguistic diversity and the effect that their language proficiency has on the client. Asian Americans, however, do share a number of cultural values. Family tends to be central in Asian American cultures. The family often exerts influence over decision making. Asian Americans are usually collectivist, meaning the group's welfare trumps the individual's welfare. They have obligation and a strong sense of duty to family. Parents tend to be authoritarian and directive, and there's also a focus on honor and saving face. Regarding interpersonal relationships, some virtues are for Asian Americans to be non-directive, non-confrontational, and self-controlled, so containing strong emotions is valued. This is very important for counselors to be aware of. Further, intimacy in marriage. Asian Americans are sometimes discouraged to date, and relationships can be prearranged. Further, many Asian Americans are pressured to marry within their ethnic community. Regarding education, Asian Americans tend to have a high regard for learning. There's often pressure from the family to obtain certain jobs, and there's a belief that education enhances the entire family. Regarding gender, Asian American men are typically expected to be the breadwinners of the family. In Asians, compared to Americans, or compared to white Americans, there tends to be more flexibility in the notion of masculinity. Further, men are raised to be group and family focused. They are sometimes stereotyped in the US as feminine or passive. Regarding women, they are typically responsible for passing on cultural values. They tend to be more centered than men, and they are often stereotyped as sexualized objects. For example, the mail order bride stereotype. Regarding their tendency to seek mental health treatment, studies show that Asian Americans underutilize mental health services, and they often prematurely terminate those services. This might be due to stigmas around seeking mental health treatment. So there may be shame around seeking help because it might compromise family reputation or might be considered a breaking away from family reliance. Further, there's a Western counseling emphasis on self-disclosure, and that might be antithetical to some Asian American values. Thank you, and that was my presentation.